Welcome to the University of Michigan Dentistry Podcast Series, promoting oral health care worldwide.
We will be doing a Class 3 composite restoration. First of all, we will inspect the lesion with the mirror to find out the exact extent of it in the mouth. If you notice, you can see a grayish area, grayish tan area, and we're outlining it with the Explorer. Then we will check occlusion on this case. The occlusion is very important to us, of course, in any restoration. We'll first of all check it without any articulating paper and observe where the teeth strike. Then with articulating paper, have the patient close their mouth several times, and then again with a mirror, we will check to see where the contact point is in relationship to the carious lesion. We see here that it is incisal to our lesion. The next step then will be to look at the x-ray again to see just how large this lesion is. If you notice the extent here as we come in, the dento-enamel junction is broken. We go down incisally, now axially toward the pulp, and notice as it goes to the cervical and then back up through the dento-enamel junction. After completion of the isolation of the tooth with rubber dam, saliva ejector, and so on, we will now be ready for our cavity preparation. This is a 1/2 round burr in the high-speed handpiece. You will notice the relationship of this 1/2 round in size to the carious lesion. As we point out here, this is the extent again of the carious lesion with the burr. The actual cavity preparation that we're interested in is here. Notice the lingual opening. Cavo-surface margins have no bevels. As we look at it interproximally, we notice that the extent of the preparation drops toward the incisal, curves with the labial, and drops again to the cervical, and then come out to the cavo-surface margin on the lingual. If you notice the retentive grooves in the incisal, cervical, and labial. We will now start with a 1/2 round burr, but before we start, I'd like to compare a number 2 burr with it. Many dentists wish to use a number 2, but look at the difference in the size. And as we look back and remember what our x-ray showed. Now, if you notice, the first penetration point is just inside the dento-enamel junction, or the marginal ridge. It's a pendulating motion on and off the tooth. Pendulating, if you notice, a piece of tooth flew out there, and that will happen when you go through into the carious lesion. We are going cervically and incisally with that pendulating motion again. This is what produces the retentive form that I showed you on the original model. Now, it is well to stop once in a while and look, dry it out, and look at what you have done. We're now drying it out. If you will notice now, there is decalcification still in the labial portion of this preparation. But we are cutting a normal situation. If you look closely, you can see that there is stain, which is possible, carious lesion still on the axial wall, but we're paying no attention to it. We are going in now and forming what we would call an ideal cavity preparation. This in itself will give us a convenience form and access to remove the rest of the carious lesion. We've decided that there still is that bit of decalcified enamel and also some caries in the dento-enamel junction. So we're back in removing this. We will not use the high-speed burr to remove caries beyond the normal depth of a cavity preparation. Notice with this arrow we are pointing out again decalcification of the labial, and this is of extreme importance to us because it leaves us with a faulty margin if we do not remove it. Looking against the axial wall, you will see there is quite a bit of carious lesion remaining. Now, with the conventional speed and a number 2 round burr, now notice the difference in the size of the burr. We will come in at with conventional speed and slowly remove the rest of the carious lesion. Remembering we have arrived at what we think is a normal cavity preparation. Light touch, relatively high speed with this conventional speed. Again, on and off the tooth. We do not hold it on the tooth constantly. Notice that motion. It's of extreme importance in any cavity preparation. Now a little water, and we will rinse it. Dry it out gently. Do not over dry or dehydrate the dentin. Now checking with an explorer. Do you notice we're picking out little bits of debris? We're checking into the incisal, now the cervical, to see whether or not that lesion is removed. We decided that it stuck a little toward the cervical axial. And again, we're still after that little bit of decalcified enamel, of extreme importance to us. Notice that the outline form is still the same that we started with. The axial wall is deeper. Now we are in with a hole that we will sharpen up that labial wall and the incisal wall and the cervical using the hoe. A scraping motion. The straight fissure burr, a 55 or a 56, is now utilized. Using this burr, we will only cut enamel with it. This is very important. Only enamel. This does not cut against the axial wall, the dentin, at all. Just into the enamel itself. This smooths it off. It gives us a cable surface margin that comes at 90 degrees with the tooth. And then you will bring the burr out toward the lingual and smoothing off that margin as much as possible. Rinse it off and examine again. If you will note, there still is some carious lesion against the axial wall. This is what we are trying to reproduce now, the number 2 model that we have given you. If you will look at it, you'll see the retentive form as it goes toward the labial, cervically and incisal extensions. We have not placed any retention in our cavity preparation in the axial walls yet. Now, when the final caries removal, with this angle, you can see that there is still a carious lesion remaining on the axial wall. We will take a spoon excavator, and with gentle pressure, you will notice that we can peel some of this out. This sometimes is sufficient to remove all of it. It's often a good time, though, to take in conventional speed a number 2 or a number 4 round burr, depending upon the size of the lesion, and gently, with a high speed and a gentle touch, remove the remaining carious lesion. The cavity preparation is now ready for its refinement and retention. We first of all check to see that there is no carious lesion remaining. Check your dento-enamel junctions very thoroughly with an explorer and also by inspection. Now with a half round burr or a quarter round in some places, we will now start our retentive groove. There will be the retentive groove is the slightest in the incisal. It gets a little larger in the labial portion and then becomes rather prominent at the cervical. There are times in cavity preparations for a composite class 3 that you can get retention only in the cervical and not the labial or incisal, depending upon the thickness of the tooth that remains in those areas. We must not undermine enamel to gain our retention. Now, our final refinement of this preparation is done again with a hole. If you notice the look of this enamel now, it's beautifully sharp. There's no decalcification left on the margins. We're using the hole on the end to scrape the labial and then come down to the incisal. Notice that. Rinse off your debris. You cannot see into a cavity that is filled with debris. Notice again now the cavo-surface margin of extreme importance, very smooth, coming at right angles, no bevels. And then out to the labial wall, how smooth this wall is. We cannot have a smooth preparation, finished preparation, without starting with a smooth cavity preparation. This is, of course, one of the most important steps in our whole procedure. This preparation, as I say, relates to your number 2 that you have in your, at your desk. We will use Cavitec, which is a zinc oxide eugenol preparation to place against the deepened portion of the axial wall. We are hoping then that the zinc oxide eugenol will be an obtundant for that pulp. You've all mixed Cavitec, as we do here, very quickly, very smoothly, very simple to use. And small amounts are used. Please note this. We are going to form our pulpa protection cement bases in line or take the exact shape of the axial wall as it is. We use here the convex surface of a small spoon, a 17, or you can use a small ball burnisher. But note now, it's just touched against the axial wall, a thin film. This is simply to reduce the inflammation of the pulp. Notice we're going to cover the entire axial wall, but only on dentin. After about 30 seconds, you can use a cavity liner, such as copalite that you have. Now, we have to be extremely careful that no copalite comes in contact with the cavo-surface margins, or any of the enamel, really, in this preparation. But this is covered over the Cavitec and any dentin that still might be exposed, keeping it from, if you notice here, keeping it from the enamel walls. We're mixing zinc phosphate cement, primary and secondary. And while the mixing of the cement is going on, or if you're doing it yourself, before you start mixing, you take a hole and go around all of the margins. Notice this, just in case any of that cavity liner had touched them. That will remove any of the cavity liner. Cavity liner is not compatible with a composite, but we're using it here as an added protection against the acid of the zinc phosphate cement that we're placing. Another thing that you should remember while we're doing this is that composite should not be placed against a zinc oxide preparation. Zinc phosphate mixed in the regular way, a primary and a secondary mix. Now we're checking for the primary, not quite ready. So we add a little powder. Remember, when you mix zinc phosphate cement, you are mixing to a consistency, not just the amounts that you put out. Each day it'll vary a little bit. So you mix to a consistency. Should draw up about 1 inch there, or 1.5 inches. A little bit more now will make it just right. Draws up about 1 inch, 1.5 inches, and then breaks off. That means that the primary consistency is just right. Do you note now the operator picks up on the point of a cowhorn explorer? Notice how small that is. And he's going to touch some retentive dots into the preparation on the axial wall, but away from the pulp as much as possible. You can see the two, cervically and incisally. In the meantime, the zinc phosphate cement is being mixed to a very heavy consistency that you can roll in your fingers and that will not stick to your fingers or the instruments. This is again rolled in powder. The powder is zinc oxide. which is good for the tooth. And the liquid, of course, is a phosphoric acid. Now, with the back of the same spoon that you used for the Cavitec, you can place a small amount, and it will cover this wall, contouring it to the area that was remaining from removing of the carious lesion. Notice the small amount. Notice the small amount. This is of extreme importance. Put it in and gently tap it and burnish it to place. And if you've mixed it correctly, this is all the time that it takes to place. Not on any enamel. Not on any enamel. If you notice it, like there was a little piece on the enamel wall, just go back in with your instrument and pop it out. And keep it out of your retentive groove also. If you look closely, you can see the retentive groove in the labial, where we're pointing, is very clean. And out the incisal now he shows, there was a spot. So out it comes. So take your Explorer and just check. Now in the cervical, maybe a tiny spot, but not much. Notice the contour of it. It is not built out to replace the lost dentin. Matrix replacement. The matrix, of course, is of extreme importance because this really is the beginning of the finishing of your preparation. Now, on your model, we have a curved matrix. We will pre-test the matrix in the mouth. We'll show you that in just a moment. But note how they pull this matrix. You will place it on the tooth, and you will put the pressure on the lingual or labial opening, whichever you have, and then pull the strip. Now, note as we pre-test so that we will know how this contours to the tooth itself. Now, as we pull it this way, there, can you see now that there is a good cervical adaptation? We do wedge these preparations. The wedge does two things, really. It will sometimes help maintain the strip for you, and we use a soft stimulant wedge. The second thing that it does, of course, is to give you a good cervical adaptation. So now we will pre-test this wedge. We want to see just where it will go. Once you mix your materials, you do not have time to do any guessing or trying. Everything you have to know exactly what to do as you place the material. We don't need the full length of that. And we noticed that as we placed it into the preparation or beneath it at the cervical, it was a little too high. This would then result in a concavity of our preparation at the cervical, which you know, of course, would give us a gingival problem and also have a good place for plaque and food particles to catch and thus recurrent decay. Now that cervical wedge is very nice at the cervical. Back goes the strip. We know now how we're going to adapt this strip. We place it in place before we start mixing or getting anything out on the pads. We want that in place, but the wedge is removed. In the manipulation of the materials and placement, we will be using, and placement especially, we'll be using a Teflon, a premier Teflon instrument. It is a flat-bladed instrument on both ends, and it is used to burnish the material into place. Then we have a carrier for the composite itself. It consists of a sort of a barrel and a plunger, and then it has a disposable plastic tip which has its own little plunger to go into it. This plastic tip will be filled with material, the plunger tip placed in it such as you're seeing here, and then that will be placed into the syringe. We're using a two-paste system here in which we will use equal amounts of the catalyst and the universal paste. This two-paste system happens to have tints. Now, there are many times when you do need tints, and we will have them out in the dispensing area for you. The one thing to remember about using tints is that you have to use a tiny amount, and it would be well to mix a little bit and place a tint so that you know what you are doing. If you notice, the spatula is square on the right end and rounded on the left end. This is so that you will use one end in the catalyst and one end in the universal paste. You cannot combine these two with any amounts, or the entire mix or the entire batch of material you have will be spoiled. So in the catalyst, we use the curved or the round, C for C. And of course, this spatula is disposable. You use it only the once. Small amounts are taken out, will be dispensed. It's a very expensive material, and you do not need a lot of it to fill most of our preparations. With this paste system, we now turn the spatula and we'll take out the universal paste, but we use equal amounts of each. A very simple method of mixing. We are stirring this. As you noticed, he stirred the catalyst, and now he stirs the universal paste. The manufacturers say this is not necessary, that it's homogenized, but we feel that we get better results if every day, at least, these are stirred. Now, the ladies in the dispensing clinic will take care of this for you, and they will dispense it on a pad such as this for you. Now we are ready to mix. It's a matter of just putting the two of them together for 20 seconds, mixing, patting, keeping it in a small area because you have a small amount. It will become one color. They are very close to begin with, so you have to watch this, and it is best to time it. Now this is transferred to the small disposable plastic tube, right from the spatula. The plastic insert is now placed in here and pressed just even with the orifice. Now it is placed into the syringe. Into the syringe, and a little pressure is placed on the handle to squirt out some of the material. There. Do you see the material come out? Now it is placed into the furthest point of the cavity preparation. Very important. Keeping it in contact with tooth structure and squirting and withdrawing at the same time that you're squirting. You have to overfill, but do not overfill too much. Then you saw the Teflon instrument come in and wipe off the excess. And if you notice now, the thumb is placed over the lingual opening, and it is pulled to the labial, and the wedge is placed in with pressure. After 5 minutes, the wedge is removed. That is 5 minutes from the time you start mixing. The wedge is removed, and the matrix strip is removed. We now wait another 5 minutes before we will actually start the finishing. It is well, though, to look at this preparation and see that we do have it filled completely. The finishing procedure, as I mentioned before, actually starts with your filling material, when you're filling the tooth, and also with the adaptation of the matrix. But now we will go into the final finishing. On the left, you see a 12 blade, very sharp curved blade that you have in your kits. On the right was a Wiedelstadt chisel. Now as we pass across these stones, there's the green stone, round and carrot shaped, the white Arkansas point, round and carrot shaped, and the 7901 burr, a Midwest jet burr for finishing. If you use a green burr, or green stone rather, you have to follow that area with a white Arkansas point and the 7901. Now at the end we see a mandrel for our sandpaper discs. These are waterproof discs. And the one on the left, of course, is fine. The one on the right is coarse. And we use the KY sterile lubricant jelly, water soluble, for our polishing with the discs. There is a strip, as you can see, at the bottom of this sterile lubricant tube. It has a coarse grit on the right, an open space in the middle, and a finer grit on the left. In this case, we're going to start using the round green stone on the lingual portion because we did have a bit of excess, which most of us will have as we fill these. This again is a light touch, relatively high speed, but very light. We want to reduce the friction and the heat generated as much as possible. You notice the on and off motion. This is true of nearly everything that we do in dentistry with a rotating instrument, on and off, not holding it in contact with the material or the tooth at all times. Taking off the excess with the green stone. You're starting now, I think, to see the cavity outline. This is the 12 blade that we mentioned before. A little dryness shows you just where that is. Now, this instrument is used to score the material away from the margin. Do not try to score this right at the margin, or you will have a void in your margin. And then after scoring, it is lifted out, as you could see. Now, the carrot-shaped stone is run along the marginal ridge to develop the outer incline of the marginal ridge, and also at the cervical to take off any of the excess that we might have. It is very important for you in the finishing procedure to not touch onto the enamel, if possible. We're all going to touch it a little as we do it, but keep that to a very, very minimum, because these stones will roughen it. Now we check. We notice there's a little heaviness here and there. The white Arkansas point now is brought into play. And we will go over any area that has been touched, which in this case has been the entire lingual portion of the preparation. Anything that has been touched by the green stone must now be touched by the white stone, or it will leave a roughness. Roughness, of course, will not be comfortable to the patient, and it will also have a tendency to collect plaque and have recurrent caries more readily. The carrot-shaped stone is brought into play. This can also, it depends on the contour of the tooth, or how you use these stones. This again is mainly for the contouring of that outer incline of the marginal ridge. Now look closely at the cervical. You'll see we still have a little excess. But at this point, it's rather a spade-shaped central, so that we were able to get our carrot-shaped stone in on the entire surface, which gives us a very beautiful contour of the tooth itself. Now he's going at the cervical slightly. Check again. Always inspect. Always keep checking. Don't overdo. One of our problems when we're first doing these things is that we have a tendency to overfinish. Now the 7901 burr, it's a 12-bladed carbide burr, run in conventional speed and very light touch. Very light touch. You notice we're at the cervical now. Being so careful not to touch the cervical enamel. The KY jelly is now placed over the restoration. And we can come back. We noticed that there were a few little grooves placed on that lingual surface, so we will come back with a white Arkansas point, the very fine one, with a lubricant, and just gently touch again. Patients' tongues are very susceptible to any change, and they'll often say to you, "Doc, that feels rough." So this, after we get the rubber dam off, is a final check, really, what we can do. Now with the discs, we will break the back of the disc on our fingernail. Just gently press it against the back of the disc, against your fingernail, and press, and it loosens that up for us so that we do not cut ridges into our restoration. I think you can see the cavity outline, now the cavity preparation outline, and how smooth it really is. It turned out very nicely, but we will check again. There is really no indication when we are going from tooth to restoration or from restoration to tooth. We have to remember that this did have a slight tendency to come out toward the labial. So now we will check the labial portion of this tooth. If you look at it from the labial, you will see there is a slight bit of excess at the cervical and even down to the incisal a little. So with our 12 blade, we will now trim We will trim that labial area, cutting with the blade touching the tooth and the restorative material. Now checking again. Now placing our lubricant, because we will put a little disc in there just to smooth up what we have done. And this fine waterproof disc gives us a very nice finish. I think you can see it's a cervical now, and you can see the labial extension of it. Look very closely. Checking once more. This checking, you can't do it too often. You have to have a feel and know what you are looking for. Now the strip that you saw earlier, the coarse side is on the left, but there is a place with no grit on it in the middle so that we do not touch contact. Now notice, that was placed through and then pulled and rubbed against the cervical. You place your thumb or finger against the tooth and the strip on the lingual, and then pull it out, and that finishes the cervical down very beautifully for you, keeping contact with that finger or thumb against the lingual. Rinse it off and check. And that we are now ready to remove the rubber dam, because we still have to check occlusion and have the patient feel the restoration with their tongue. With the rubber dam removed, before we put carbon paper or anything, put your finger on the tooth you've been working on and have the patient close. You can sometimes feel a jar or not. This is a good indication. Then the final check with the articulating paper, and as you notice the lowers, you can see 2 or 3 places it's marked. Now look back into the mirror, and you will see that we have the contact incisal to the restoration where it was in the beginning.
You've been listening to a presentation from the University of Michigan School of Dentistry, which is dedicated to supporting open learning and open educational resources. This recording is licensed under the Creative Commons. It may be reused and redistributed for nonprofit use. Please attribute materials to the University of Michigan School of Dentistry and redistribute under this same license. For more information on how this and other University of Michigan School of Dentistry recordings may be used, visit www.dent.umich.edu/license.